Good morning, everybody. Thank you for all coming to this great festival. 6,500 people. There's complete chaos, people coming in and out. I am sure that this session will be one part exciting, one part just drama and chaos. I am joined by four exciting people today from the e-commerce industry. Over on my far left is Nick Nash. Say hi, Nick.
Hi.
Nick is from Garena. He's the group president. Do you want to say a quick hello about Garena?
Garena is one of the older internet companies here in Southeast Asia, and today probably the largest by revenue and size. We do three things. We have a digital content platform, we have an e-commerce platform called Shopee, and we have a payments business called AirPay.
And on his right is Tyler Norwood, Head of Corporate Development for Global Fashion Group. Morning, Tyler.
Morning.
How you doing? Straight from, now in Singapore, but previously Vietnam.
I was in Vietnam before, yeah.
Okay.
Now Singapore.
And dropping in is Andrew Sanduk, who's the Chief CRO for the Orami. And you were the co-founder as well, or not quite?
I co-founded Mox Indonesia, so
and,
before the merge.
Both Nick and Andrew flew in at about 4 a.m. this morning to be joining us here from Jakarta, so special thanks for them. And finally, right next to me is Dan Murray, who's the co-founder of Grabble, which is UK's leading and fastest growing fashion application.
This is very true, and I did not wake up at 4 a.m. and get on a flight. I was already here, so.
Now in Singapore, but previously Vietnam.
I was in Vietnam before, yeah.
Okay.
Now Singapore.
And dropping in is Andrew Sanduk, who's the Chief CRO for the Orami. And you were the co-founder as well, or not quite?
I co-founded Mox Indonesia, so before the merge.
Both Nick and Andrew flew in at about 4 a.m. this morning to be joining us here from Jakarta, so special thanks for them. And finally, right next to me is Dan Murray, who's the co-founder of Grabble, which is UK's leading and fastest growing fashion application.
This is very true, and I did not wake up at 4 a.m. and get on a flight. I was already here, so.
Right, we will be taking questions on pigeons, so if you get excited and ask a question, send it through. If there are no questions, we shall try some e-commerce incentives to get some questions going. We'll see how that goes. Now, maybe, Nick, we can start with you on your side of the fence, which is, in e-commerce, there's a lot of conversation about some big sectors, such as fashion, such as clothing, such as those areas like travel. How do you see the development? What sectors do you see growing, and where do you think the energy is?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Matt. First of all, everybody, good morning. It's so nice to be here and to see a lot of very familiar faces in the audience. We're very proud to be a Singaporean company and to have all of our development and much of our IP based here. So it's very special to be at this panel, at this conference. Matt, in answer to your question, I think actually I want to change the terms of the conversation a little bit. I think it's a very healthy shift for us as an industry. For the last 4 or 5 years, the unrelenting focus for everybody in internet has been revenue growth or GMV growth. And I think the single flaw with that is that revenue does not necessarily translate into cash flow and profitability, and not all kinds of revenue are treated equally. The way we think about it, and I would encourage us as an industry to shift towards more of this direction, is to think in terms of gross profit. So not to ask the question about revenue or GMV, total addressable market, TAM, but to ask the question about gross profit pool. How much profitability is there that we can collectively go after and be a part of? So when you think about e-commerce, for example, actually, when you measure it on a gross profit basis and on a revenue basis, you end up with a very different map of the world. It's almost like how in the Mercator projection, Greenland looks really big, but in reality, it's actually rather small. And Papua New Guinea looks very small, but it's actually very big. So for example, the electronics online retail business turns out to be actually a lot less attractive a market when measured on a gross profit basis, but the computer game business turns out to be an enormous business on a gross profit basis. Likewise, businesses like our two friends here that are in fashion tend to be much more interesting than businesses that are more focused on laptops or on cell phones. So the conversation to have really is, where's the gross profit growth going to be over time, not where the revenue growth is going to be.
Right. And Tyler, do you agree with that? Is that how you're looking at the industry, or are you looking at other sort of barriers to fast growth and government regulations, infrastructure, some of the things that are standing in your way of growing your business faster?
I think there's two things. So one is the infrastructure surrounding e-commerce, I think right now is a big inhibitor of growth. There are more companies than you can name that from an operations standpoint and from a marketing standpoint are more than ready to go and address much larger markets than they're addressing right now. There are companies that are ready to be completely global. And what's really holding them back is two things. One is logistics infrastructure, and two is government, essentially. And we still live in a world where you have to ship things through customs to get them across borders. That's a big inhibitor for companies that want to ship products globally. And e-commerce has rapidly outgrown how fast governments can keep up with what's going on and put regulations in place and understand how is this beneficial for our country, how is it beneficial for our country working in a global landscape. And e-commerce is really globalizing much faster than we can keep up with. Right. Secondly, to Matt's point, I think that it's 100% true. I think the entire e-commerce industry is going through a big adjustment now and looking at what is actually sustainable, right? Anybody can go raise $500 million and spend it all and have 1 billion customers and sell 6,000 TVs a day. Sure, fine, but it costs you $500 million. What do you have to show for it at the end of the day? Right. So thinking more sustainably for the long term, I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation and adjustment, and the winners in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be the ones that have already been thinking about profit and not just revenue growth.
Okay. So, Andrew, Orami is Southeast Asia's #1 portal and shopping destination for women. So, already hugely successful as a brand. Are you also looking at this area of sustainability in terms of profitability and growth? And what time horizon would you say is sustainable? Is it daily, monthly, yearly, 2 years, 3 years? What do you think is a good way to look at sustainability?
I think if we look at how we fundamentally built the business, right? There's been a lot of emotion, I think, in the last couple of years where people they just run, they just build something, but actually they forget to actually build a business, to actually sell a product with profit, right? So just fundamentally, like how we build a business. For us, how we expanded. So actually now we have an office in Thailand and in Indonesia. It's always been about, of course it's top line, but it's always been also about the bottom line. So we've been building the business actually fundamentally as we think how we should build a business. So if we talk about what's the horizon, right? What's the horizon, or how do we track it? I mean, it's really a day-to-day execution of how we build it.
Right.
So, and we also, I mean, what Tyler also said, we feel that, of course, as well in the whole ecosystem, that the emphasis is about, not only about the nice top-line figures, but it's actually like what business are you building and what value are you creating for your customers? Because apart from getting 100,000 customers, how many of these customers are actually coming back to you, right? So I think I think the game is changing a bit, right? Going much more to the core of building a healthy business, and it's always been a priority for us.
Okay, cool. And Dan, one of the things I find most exciting about your business is this blend of content and commerce. Is that one of the keys to your success? And how do you look at the differentiation between content and commerce, or is it the same thing to you?
So it's definitely not the same thing to us. We actually started off focused on mobile with the basic question to ourselves about, well, mobile commerce should technically translate to the same metrics as e-commerce, which if you look at e-commerce as an industry, you've got 10 to 15 years of data to back up what metrics you should be looking for to sustain an e-commerce business. And when we launched on mobile, which was 1.5 years ago, we expected the same kind of trends to happen on e-commerce, the way that you re-engage with the customer, the way the trends should go. And what we learned very quickly is that you can throw the e-commerce metrics straight out the window when you go to mobile. The fundamental biggest mistake that anyone makes on mobile is thinking about it as a computer with a small screen. It's not. You have to forget what you think about from an organizational perspective and put yourself with your mobile phone in your hand as the customer and look at how you interact on your mobile phone. And ultimately, the native app game and the mobile game is particularly complex in that it's very hard to get downloaded. It's 20 times more difficult to stay relevant. And so the benefit of having your app on someone's phone is that you've got your logo and your brand stuck on someone's phone the whole time, which is something that someone web e-commerce would love, right? That's an incredible branding opportunity. But the reality is, the downside is, unless you have a relevant means of communication to get someone coming back of their own accord to your app, you're going to end up getting deleted. And you'll never get downloaded again. So what we actually ended up moving into for this very reason was content. And we realized that actually by creating curating an experience on mobile and focusing completely on the content experience as a primary, that would enable us to keep customers coming back, discovering more regularly and even daily, and out the other end of the funnel, purchase more. So our entire focus has been on content and what the right form of content is and how much video we put in a collection and how we make things shoppable. But actually that's become the biggest opportunity for us as well, because with native advertising being such an interesting sort of area at the moment that's growing so fast, it provides, we think, actually just as sustainable a monetization mechanism as the e-commerce side.
Right. Okay. Now we have lots of exciting questions from the audience that are coming in through Pigeon. There are, of course, as you might expect, questions about large Chinese players like Alibaba. I think they have 600 million active monthly users. And Jack Ma said that 50% of his revenue has to come from outside China. So the questions coming in from the audience is, how can non-Chinese platforms compete with people like Alibaba when they start to go big in Southeast Asia? And the recent acquisition of Lazada is just one example of that. So how do you feel about Alibaba and the Chinese platforms and their march out of that region into this region? And will it be help or hindrance to players like you?
You want to answer?
I'm happy to start, sure.
I mean, I have one opinion.
Go ahead.
For me, if you want to do what Alibaba is doing, which is have every single product available in the entire world and build a company that can ship it anywhere in the entire world, you'll never beat Alibaba, right? They'll always win. So don't try to build a company that's going to compete with Alibaba head to head. If you want to build a company that will survive Alibaba moving into Southeast Asia, will survive them moving into other markets, in my opinion, there's two things you have to focus on. One is product selection, curating and having good quality products, and the second is customer experience. If you can provide those two things over the long term, Alibaba is going to come in, they're going to disrupt your market, they're going to spend a lot of money, they're going to make marketing more expensive, they're going to cause a lot of noise. But if you stay focused on those two things, in my opinion, you'll make it through. Because your customers will stay loyal to you. Yeah, maybe they'll go try and buy something on Alibaba, but they won't have the same experience and they won't have access to the same quality products that you have. And that's how you survive them coming into these markets. If you want to do what they're doing, they'll beat you every day. But focusing on something a little bit different, I think, is the key.
Okay.
I think I have a similar view to you, and let me answer the question maybe from two different angles to triangulate to an answer. The first view is that it's very positive for Southeast Asia that a terrific, well-established global company is coming and making a serious commitment. And if we think about Southeast Asia, we have 670 million people, we have $3.5 trillion of GDP, probably $1 trillion of discretionary consumer spending, of which no more than 25 billion is online right now. And of that 25 billion, less than 5 is in organized platforms like a Lazada, Zalora, Shopee, others. So if someone's coming in to open up this market and to have more people get a taste of e-commerce for the first time, I love that. In just the same way that the Google guys loved AOL for sending little CD-ROMs to half of the planet. Someone can open up the market. The other way to look at it, though, is to think about business model. I've learned in my career that no amount of money can change a business model that's already developed a niche and a brand. And what I mean by that is the following. In e-commerce, there's always two fundamental decisions to make. Are you going to be asset light or asset heavy? And are you going to be electronics focused or non-electronics focused? And Lazada has great people, it's a great business, but they elected to be asset heavy and electronics focused, and that led to a certain path and a certain brand and a certain demographic of users. It's actually a very different kind of business than Taobao in China. So I think businesses like Zalora, businesses like Moxie Bilna, Orami, businesses like Shopee that are pursuing different strategies on that 2x2 grid can earn very good livings in a different way.
Right, okay. So a big question that's coming from the audience is the area of digital transformation, which is rapidly becoming cost of entry to a lot of players. So digital transformation is no longer unique, it's no longer the differentiator. So in a world where everybody is transforming through digital, what is the differentiation that's going to be required for success? Is that at a brand level? Is that at a product level? Is it a customer experience level? So a question from the audience is specifically that.
So, I mean, one of the most important things we do at Grabble, and obviously in the UK, statistically speaking, the UK is the most online e-commerce focused market in the world. and also the most mobile-first market in the world, just on a population basis. And because of that, you actually have a lot of questions to ask. You have a very forward-thinking audience. You have a lot of ability to get fast metrics quickly. And the one thing that we learn more than anything else is the customer experience, and understanding who your customer is and why they come to your product over someone else's product is always going to be the differentiating factor. And ultimately, I think all those things that A and everyone else was saying about Alibaba and stuff are actually completely correct. But if you have a brand that you build, which stands for something, and you have a point of differentiation and a customer experience and an understanding of the psychology of the consumer on the platform at which they're using, so for us it's mobile, but it's a completely different psychology of why someone goes to you on web, then ultimately your focus on the brand and the way you communicate with that customer is going to pay dividends. Right. And it's more important necessarily. Consumers don't care about what kind of technology you use. Yeah. Like, they don't. They just care about, does this brand speak to me? Does it have the same values that I do? And those are the most important things. And I just think that there's a lot of examples in the world where everything's moving so fast and there's a lot of change going on all the time, and people get very obsessed with changing or panicking about how to instill a lot of this stuff into their businesses, especially new businesses. And ultimately, some things never change. And one of the things that never changes is that people like a brand to stand for something, have a point of differentiation, and essentially associate with them. You are either for that person or not, and that's nothing to be ashamed of.
Okay, awesome. We now have 16 votes for you guys to cast a little bit into the future. So we're living in the moment. We're trying to get sales of the day at this second. It's a very data-driven, instant business you're in. But people want to cast your mind 5, 10, 15 years forward and say, what do you think is coming down the pipeline? For example, only 4 people with a smartphone in Southeast Asia have actually yet to buy something online. So we've still got a huge way to go. So futurecast a little bit, 10 years in the future. How do you see it evolving? What do you think the next disruption is? Where do you think the business will be going?
So one of the areas that I am really interested in is content creation, specifically around marketing. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, 2 things are happening. One, a lot more people are adopting mobile technology. A lot more people are getting online. The second is that everyone in this room now has control over the information that you consume. So you control the ads you see, you control the news you consume, you control everything customized to yourself. And over the last 50 years, I think companies and marketers have gotten very lazy in the way that they approach customers, because they could push something through a channel and you had no choice but to watch it, right? If you're watching the Super Bowl, you have no choice but to watch it, so they were lazy about the way that they create content and the way that they engage with their customers. In the next 10 years, I see that completely turning on its head, where every single customer can decide exactly what they see, the information they consume, and if you're not putting the time and energy into creating a compelling and engaging narrative, nobody's going to listen to your brand anymore. So brands that have long relied on being incumbent and being there and you using them because you have to use them are going to completely disappear. And the consumers are going to decide 100% which companies are successful and which companies are not.
Nick, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, I'll go out on a limb and say that the single biggest meaningful change, I think, in the next 10, 15 years in my mind is Moore's Law for SKUs. What I mean by that is, in the old days, Gordon Moore at Intel created a concept where the price performance of a chip would roughly double every 18 months. And that incredible compounding over 30, 40 years led to the world that we have today. Now, almost everyone in the world, sooner or later, is going to have a device. What people crave right now is uniqueness and authenticity. And when we talk about commerce, one of the most important concepts is having something unique that you can wear, that you can buy, that you can eat, that you can experience. And in the traditional offline retail world, the information costs and the minimum lot sizes for manufacturing and the minimum lot sizes for marketing lead to a minimum efficient scale for every stock keeping unit. But in the online world, and particularly with the mobile world, you can atomize stock keeping units to create a batch of 5, a batch of 50, a batch of 100. So my prediction is over the next 15, 20 years, every 18 months, the number of SKUs in the world will double. And it'll give people much more authentic, unique customer experiences.
So I kind of related to that. There are a lot of questions from the audience about there are so many people with so many big budgets heading in this direction. If you're just getting started and you don't have 500 million in VC money floating around in your pocket, just say, how do you get started on small, modest budgets? If you're a client out there, how do you get going? What tips do you have for people to get up and running in this space and start attacking this space quite quickly?
I think it comes down to also what Tyler said. If you go into this market where there's a specific niche that you can actually conquer, and it's very clear like what value you have for this specific market, then for sure you can actually start very small. You don't have to blast millions of dollars to actually conquer that market. But from there on, you can actually just expand the business, right? I think in the coming years, this whole brand building and experience is going to be key. Like even if you start small or big, brand building is actually the thing which keeps customers coming back, right? And at the end of the day, you can talk about pricing, you can talk about product selection. When the big Chinese wave is coming into the market, well, it actually already started, right? There's a lot of things that they can replicate within a second. So even customer service online specifically, they can copy it. There's like no doubt about it. So, but what they can't copy is this local brand stickiness with customers. So I think especially like small brands, I see it as well. Like I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia, and I see there are a lot of standalone brands popping up. A lot of creativity is there. So there's a lot of room to start new business, even though there's maybe smaller budgets. But if you start with very clear niche, very clear value proposition for your specific customer segment, I think budget is not even doesn't have to be that big.
I would agree with that, because if you look at the Korean market, for example, it's all the fashion market there is all about independent brands, and that's what people love to buy into. It's not, they push back on that mass consumer, like big brand stuff, and the UK is a pretty good mix of both, but brands with heritage, brands with a story are the ones that are really sticky in the UK as well. And I think there's, it depends, from the questions from the crowd, it depends on the ambition. I mean, no one's saying that you have to be as Allura size. No one's saying you have to be Alibaba. I mean, those are insane ambitions. If you are a maker and you want to create a product and you want to know how you can survive in a market against those people, it's a really simple strategy. You find a customer and you work out what value are you providing and what does your brand and your point of differentiation mean to that person, and that person probably has 10 friends that feel exactly the same way, and that's how you'll grow your business. And I don't think that changes compared to like the challenge with Alibaba creeping into like Southeast Asia now than it did 100 years ago. You just have to have a creative vision that you stand for and build on it.
Well, given that we have a number of people on the stage who are focused on the fashion category, we're getting a lot of questions a little bit about how do you actually motivate sales in this category, specifically between the online to offline world, in that in many areas, people still like to try, wear, match, assemble, accessorize. So how do you see the blend between online to offline, and what does that play in your go-to-market strategy?
So, I mean, just to jump in, we play to that very strongly, because I very much believe that a customer that's shopping on their mobile phone is mostly in browse mode. So we have a proposition that we build our product for where we describe all of our customers falling into two categories only: busy or bored. So we say that every single time someone picks up their mobile phone, they're busy or bored. They're in one state of mind or the other. And if you look at all the apps on your phone, you're one or the other. And so for us, we know that most of our customers are going to browse, they're going to learn, and actually it's a multi-channel environment where we want them to go in store, we want them to go online, we want the customer to genuinely get the best experience for them. If they're not comfortable purchasing on their mobile phone, they shouldn't do it. But our strategy with the content is we actually work with brands in sponsored content and advertorial. And in the UK, for example, we just did a big campaign with Harvey Nichols, which was all about driving people into the department stores. It's actually nothing about purchasing on the phone. They could if they wanted to, but we know that male customer that we were targeting for that campaign wants to go in store if he's going to spend £400 or £500 on a product. He wants to try it on. So I think it's about being sensitive to where your customer is and being quite practical to the fact that, again, put yourself in those shoes. It's a multi-channel environment.
And Andrew, your business focuses on primarily women, and the largest portal for women for shopping in Southeast Asia. Do you find in that sector the special needs for online to offline? Do you target it in different ways?
I think if you talk about, Southeast Asia or Indonesia, there's always been a lot of conferences, and they talk about when is the pivoting point for Indonesia, right, or the region in general. And I think trust is quite a big thing, right? Being able to actually deliver in an O2O way to your customers is a bridge actually to build that trust. So there's a lot of things if we talk about logistics, either financial or actual infrastructure, which keep people sometimes a bit hesitant on buying online, right? So for us, it's also crucial that we extend that option to our customers. To, for example, if they order, they could maybe pick up the goods at a hypermarket down the street. So we are actually now also piloting projects to give customers that option as well. And so far, it's been really positive because it gives people this sense of, okay, I'll see it first before I actually pay it. So on top of the whole cash on delivery, where there's still this item which is being brought to your house first, you see it, is it actually the water that I ordered? It is, then I pay. You try to give other options to build that bridge to customers and to build that trust. So it's key in this region specifically to have this O2O way of approach.
All right, we have time for one last question. We've been asked to get this conference back on schedule, seeing as it's running about 20 minutes late, so we have one more question. Lots of conversation about data in the room and the importance of data for managing your business and how you optimize, how you target, and how you use it to really grow your market share. So does anyone want to comment about how they use data in their business and how essential it is to moving forward?
So I have one thing, I'll discuss how we use data. One thing I want to preface with is I've been to ventures in 29 different countries, and a common theme I see in all the ventures that I visit is data-driven and data analytics, and data has become a buzzword, and people focus on data a lot. I've visited companies that can tell you how many women on a Tuesday when it's raining and it's 35 degrees outside will buy a blue shirt, but they cannot tell you how much gross profit they make when that shirt gets delivered to the customer, right? So data has become kind of this buzzword where it's like, well, let's figure out what's driving customers. Let's monitor our funnel. Let's make sure that we're not losing anybody or having abandoned carts, but they have no idea how much money they're even making on a shirt that they sell. So I think that we need to take a step back and stop treating data as such a buzzword and really think, what should we be actually looking at? Is it important to know who's buying this when they're leaving and when they're abandoning, when we don't even understand the profitability we have on these individual SKUs? Now, that being said, I think data is very, very important, and one of the most in any technology company, one of the actual most valuable things that we own as an asset is our data, and being able to go in. Alibaba, Amazon, etc., they not only have a lot more money than you, they can hypothesize and go and run tests inside their existing customer database and figure out what will work and what won't. And that, to me, is almost more valuable than just having cash to burn, is they can test things and run things that you would never be able to figure out on your own. And that's what I think is really the true value of data. It's not the nitpicky, tiny stuff, it's data in large amounts.
Right, okay.
I totally agree with that. I mean, in our business, we think that big data is a completely useless buzzword. What's much more important is big insight or big decisions. But let's just not call it big anything. Let's just say, how can we make better pricing decisions? How can we make better customization decisions? How can we make better underwriting decisions? Meaning, when do we take risk? When do we not take risk? If we can answer those three questions, the whole big data conversation becomes very vacuous. What's more important is the practical use of information to make decisions.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Nick. Well, good news is now we're out of time. Thank you for the crowd for all your questions. I think about 80% of that, all those questions came from you, so I hope that would help you get some insight from these leaders in e-commerce. My thanks to Nick, my thanks to Tyler, Andrew, and Dan for coming from Indonesia, Singapore, and the UK to join us today. So give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. We now hand you back to our organizers for the next step. Thank you, crew.
Nice one.